event, there's a lot of these things coming to us. Regarding the payment though, yes, that's tricky. I do kind of slightly disagree with you, and I don't mean to be a pest here, but like, there is a legal definition for nonprofit, tax, and stuff like that. However, we could disagree and say, well, are we doing all nonprofits, or with their religious events,
Right.
or, sort of.
Exactly, I think that was part of the concern too, is sort of,
Right.
it's kind of, yeah, so in my mind, I feel like this is a really, I think events are good for the community. I think they're enjoyed, and I think it's the way a village, I think it's appropriate to use a small amount of tax levy to support, to make sure that our departments aren't, overly taxed fiscally and are prepared to pay the overtime or whatever it is, the extra staff time to lend the support. If our board didn't support that tax levy, that use of tax levy, then I would say that, the applicant needs to be charged back the cost. Some of these are a higher cost than others, and the one exception would be the July 4th parade, because we wouldn't charge ourselves. And that's the only village sponsored, truly village sponsored. The feedback from the businesses is that they would expect to be charged. They would, I think Mr. Price was concerned about perhaps, the cost of police. Although I think now that I think the police department is not feeling like they need to have as many overtime officers as they once did, so that cost is going down. And the bid, of course, would prefer not to have to pay those costs of DPW staff, but
I suppose that there's a way around that. If we were to say, okay, we would allow X amount of funds for the bid activities, if you exceed this max, since the bid is making the decision on which events they want to hold, that takes us out of that and also gives them a little bit of leeway. Just one thought.
And queuing off your earlier point, I also want to, I do think that I think it's got to be, I think it's really, you can go down a pretty deep rabbit hole to go to 501c3s and then you're across all 501c3s, and then you end up with some results you don't necessarily want. So I think that it has to be kind of a uniform rule one way or another. In terms of use of funds, it's tough for me because just knowing that we're not limiting the amount of applications, we're not limiting the amount of special events. It makes it more difficult to forecast and what would be a reason. I would worry about that dollar figure creeping up too high on us.
yes.
Because we do have a tight budget this year.
Yeah, and every year, right.
So I just don't want to. I wouldn't want to put additional stress on the budgeting process. Just can't.
Right, and we'd be essentially passing a policy that has a fiscal impact, and we don't have approval for it. So it's an unfunded policy, so I think I just solved it. I guess we're charging back to everyone. Because I do think that it has to be covered, the expense has to be covered. Otherwise it is essentially coming out of our tax levy without making a policy, making a proactive decision, and that I don't think is good leadership. So. Any other?
I'm fine with charging for the true costs.
Okay.
I think that if it's a fundraiser, they're anticipating making funds,
Yeah.
and part of throwing an event that you're going to be using public resources for, hoping to have a net positive there. You have to build that into your business
It's
model.
the cost of doing business.
But I do think that I would be curious. It would be curious to know how much, like some of these events that we currently do, the Shorewood criterion, for example, I guess it was put back on the bid. This is something that you don't want, but it's also a community event that the greater, it's not just the business district that benefits
Right.
from
Well,
that.
and that's their point of why they don't think they should have to pay for it.
Right, but then we would have discretion as a board to say, okay, we will underwrite some of these charges, because it is a, you know, a collaborative bid. And so anyway, I mean, we always would have discretion of waiving fees.
It's true, but without having it a line item in the budget, you know, it's two different discussions. So it's a budgetary discussion and then it's policy. So I guess I would feel comfortable from a policy standpoint of what's within our charge here is to say that the language is that the costs are charged back to the applicant, and that part of the application process would be receiving an estimated quote thereof, and that would be part of the department. And that's what we did. There were, I think historically, when the Three Lions came with the first request for the World Cup event, the first World Cup party, that was the process that we went through, was saying, you know, we don't have money in the budget to assume these costs, to absorb these costs. So what we're gonna do internally is calculate how much we would need from the business, what we would charge back to the business, and that accompanied the application through each department. So the department head gave approval and an estimated cost.
Yep, and we've been trying, like, at least since I have been here, to provide, when we come, you know, even if they're not paying it, this is what it is.
Yes.
The estimated cost would be just the idea of it, so. But yeah, this is the first time everyone's really sat down and put the numbers on paper and looked at them all
Yeah.
together.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that was really, really helpful, because I think that's part of what was always missing from the conversation. Now, do you think that this approach addresses the staff concerns? And that maybe more was coming from Rebecca, she wanted to convey to us that, you know, we're in these tight budget constraints, where, you know, this is a board that doesn't shy away from looking at, can we eliminate positions? So if we continue to eliminate positions, whether or not we pay for the staff time, if we don't have the staff to actually do the work, that's another consideration as well. But I think, again, one, I want feedback on whether you think we've addressed that adequately, or it's still just gonna come up separately. And number two, does our policy here, have we done as much as we can with these considerations and the future?
I think as long as we can include in our, correct me if I'm wrong, that there, you know, there are going to be associated costs with, you know, kind of public works and police enforcement. You know, I've worked in areas where they've already included what it is going to be per hour for a police officer, and then they'll provide you estimated on that. So they know up front, you know, that they're not walking in thinking, yep, it's not
$150.
right, and that's it, yeah. So that would be included in the application. So there would be revamping of the application to include some of that wording, because the applicant needs to know ahead of time, you know, before they sit down at the staff level and then we say, well, there might be additional cost, here's why. Right.
Would there be, and another question for staff maybe to help us with this would be, are they real costs or estimated costs? Because if I were throwing events and I was quoted 3,000 and then the true cost came in at 5,000, am I responsible for the difference?
So they start with estimated cost. I have to go back. Can't
I mean, I
remember
was
how we
just
handled it in my last municipality. I feel like there was estimated costs, and prior to the event kicking off, they corresponded with each other just to make sure that they were on the same page, and then we invoiced them after for the real costs. So, or they paid the estimated costs, and if there was a difference, they owed it, and we would pay back, vice versa, yep, so we would send them a refund. So, you know, there's a couple ways to do that, but yeah, there's definitely, and that's why, like saying, you know, if you need a police officer, it may cost you this much per hour, you know,
Because it's a
depending.
3-hour minimum
Correct,
for
and there's-
overtime.
Right,
And yeah, I think
things like that,
Yeah.
you know, so it's.
In a sense, we're saying that the applicants need to work within the policies by which we are bound.
Correct.
So I think that's fair. Does that answer?
Sure. I mean, part of what we want to avoid, of course, is then if this is going to be onerous for staff to come up with.
Yes.
I think the big question that'll come up, and it won't maybe be so much for public works as it comes up for the police department, is if people can hire personal security and if that truly is adequate versus having an officer. Now, I know, he has someone he uses on-duty personnel to monitor the event. But there is that discussion of, and then what do you do if those security people don't show up?
You call off the event, like,
Right.
kind of what's the deal breaker?
Right.
Do you need us do you think staff is looking to us to come up with that kind of an out? Like, what's the panic button on it?
Well, because that's one question that's asked, so like if the police chief says, well, we probably estimate 2 officers at 4 hours at this much per hour, and somebody comes back and says, well, we can get 4 bouncers from this security place at this much, we'd rather do this, that's where staff has the tough discretion to make. And then do we just allow it to come to the board and the board make the approval? I don't know, and I think that's an answer that staff needs.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, that's a different policy issue regarding public safety and our comfort level, because we've disagreed considerably at the board level. Like, I'm not personally, I don't like to replace public employees with hired guns, we'll just say, in this situation. I mean, I understand, like, if bouncers, any individual business establishment is responsible for their own occupancy
Right.
and, those things, there are laws that cover that.
Yep.
But when we're talking in the public space, and then having a for-profit or not-profit hire a security company, I'm a little uncomfortable with that.
And also in that vein, just, when we're talking about what's the panic button, this can't go forward. I do appreciate that we're involved in it and getting us involved, but also, I think we need recommendations from the experts, taking the police officer's example, Chief Nimmer, if there was a if the business said, no, we don't want 2 police officers, we want to do this, I want to hear what Chief Nimmer's thoughts and recommendation were on that, because he's the public safety expert and take those thoughts to heart, so.
And again, that's kind of the space that we have been in.
Yeah.
And then we're going case by case, which we're trying to get away with for this policy.
But we can't ultimately get away with it.
There's always going to be some. But I do think, to me, listening to this conversation is, what if our policy is, 1 police officer and on duty at the time of an event that's anticipated to draw 1,000 people or more. We could do something like that, and then that's a fixed cost, it's 1 police officer, it's not, it's within it's a public employee.
But didn't we have an event with 3 lines where we didn't have any police up, we just had
Correct, I think they hired security.
Right, and I voted against that, and I personally don't want that to be part of our, I think that the staff of the business is one thing, but I think if we have a public safety concern, or feel that we need to provide a certain level of public safety for a special event, then that just needs to be built. I would prefer that it be built into the cost in some manageable way.
I agree, Fred, and I think erring on the side of caution and overestimating the cost, saying that this might require up to X amount of officers, are you still comfortable proceeding?
Right, and if they're not, it will then self-limit the number of events we have, which would address the concern of what if we end up with an event.
And I would be
street every other week.
having the police chief, after reviewing the application or during that process, make the recommendation, not including, you know what I'm saying?
Right, I don't really want those decisions to come to the board.
And I'm not trying to argue
Yeah.
against public safety. to be completely
Oh,
clear.
yeah, no, that's not what I'm hearing.
Looking at different
No.
alternatives.
No,
Yes.
absolutely, yeah, and that, it have to, the discussion, and it's a tough one to have, and you're sitting there, and you're like, well, I guess you could do this, or,
No, yes. So, and also that helps flesh out. So if these are new events or events that need some revisions, that's part of the whole process. Okay, this is, you guys work it back out or think about, do you really want to do this then?
Yep.
Yeah. So, Trustee Warren, I didn't interpret your contributions as questioning public safety or trying to find
Oh, yeah,
sort of
no,
Sort it
better.
out.
And I'm certainly just coming from a place of after, you know, a handful of years of being in this situation, thinking of what I want to come to the board level and what I really want clear enough direction so that he doesn't have to. Because that's what the department has, you know, the shared concern around is that it's like, you know, is it this way, is it this way? So given that, where do you feel like you are in terms of comfort level with letting applicants know that overtime police, at least one officer is probably going to be recommended for an event?
Hello, look at, I'm cute.
Oh, why? Oh, did you?
Is there some discretion if Junior says we don't?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that was some discretion, I think I'm fine with letting you know, hey, this might be required, but there's a chance that, you know, Chief Newman will still come in, maybe it's not. Again, I don't know, maybe that brings us back to the discretionary piece. I'm sorry for retreading all the ground.
No, I really appreciate it. No, that's exactly why we have stuff in committee, because this is to us to sort that out for sure. Chief Nimmer.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So, we are at the special events policy,
Okay.
and we have weeded through every single decision point, with the exception, the one last thing we're on. We've decided that our direction is going to be that costs to the village for special events are going to automatically be charged back to the applicant,
Okay.
in addition to their fee. With the issue, the matter of police, additional,
Yep.
you know, police service for an event. One option that we talked about to get you out of that, do you need it, do you not need it? We don't support, in lieu of a police officer hiring a private security. We don't want that. If the belief is that police service is recommended, then we want our police to provide that service. So one approach is we can have, if you have a guideline of, you know, most events, if it's 1,000 people and under, we can do it with our 3 staff on, you know, monitoring. If it's over 1,000, up to 5,000, 7,000, one overtime police officer, or off-duty police officer overtime. If it's, you know, 10 to 80,000 or 800,000 or whatever, then it's this. And just so that it gets you out of that, because you're always going to be, no one's ever going to want to pay for it.
Correct.
So they're always going to ask you if they can waive it, which doesn't get us out of the case-by-case basis.
Correct. So I would just ask that maybe give me some time to
Yes.
put some maybe criteria together.
Do you think that's a logical way? Like,
Yeah, I mean, some things that I look at are history.
yeah,
All right, so how did the events in the past go? Was there any issues or any problems? How many of the roads are closed? And then how much more traffic is that going to bring to the area? So those are a couple of things, and then time frame. You know, is it on a weekend? Is it at night? Is it during the day? How many hours? Like for instance, the soccer event. Historically, it's been fine. You know, pretty family friendly. People watching soccer. I felt based upon the historical past that we didn't need someone there. Short shenanigans where it's a little bit more of an atmosphere of, you know, cocktailing and stuff, which is totally fine, but, and then, you know, traffic and those type of shuttle buses, more on multiple bars, felt like that was an appropriate place to have an additional officer. Now, I would say that we try to use on-duty officers when we can.
okay.
And so for the short shenanigans, we did bill that straight time officer back to the shenanigans, so that at least it saved them some money on the overtime. So we try to do some of those things. Number of people certainly does come into play, but it may not be the only criteria. So let me see if I can try to put something together.
Yeah. Would you appreciate having that kind of guideline built in, or would you rather have it discretionary and that you would, whatever you thought for an event what we want to avoid is that we want to avoid having the village board make public safety decisions.
Right.
And we want to avoid having you in a position where you're getting pressured to.
Correct, and I do appreciate that. Yeah, some of it is case by case, and I don't know if we can mark all, or get all the criteria that would be applicable. So.
Oh, sorry, and because of that, one of the things we might want to build in is refund on application if if we do say that this may cost, there may be police or public safety costs associated with this. The application is refundable if they are denied or no. The application fee?
We haven't had anybody ask, but I don't see, I mean, would it be at a point where we're going to go back?
I mean, well, there's a fee for a reason, because it takes staff time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
There's
it
a
would
cost.
make sense, but I think that's the point of having upfront a very realistic.
Right, well, I guess what we're saying is it's a case-by-case basis. So someone might apply and then be told that this is going to require a set amount of officers. After we said, well, we don't know,
Yeah.
and then it comes back, well, it's going to be 6 officers or 6 hours, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, I mean.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
But at the same time, you don't want people to complain with it either. But that's why maybe, to my point earlier, that if we're a little bit more conservative in saying, we're just gonna guess from the get-go that this is, as you mentioned, gonna be a minimum 1 officer, maybe up to length per hour.
I guess the only strong opinion that I do have is that if in our professional opinion, an event would require police presence, that be honored by
Board?
the board or the
Yeah.
application. And I think, I mean, certainly I always
And we apologize, we know that in the that we have overruled your decision or your recommendation.
Yeah.
We were just discussing that before you arrived, that we don't want to be in the business of making professional decisions on public safety when that's your
Right, and I truly try to be as reasonable and
Yes.
practical as possible. I
We
really do.
appreciate that.
And I think if it came to that point, then the discussion is had with the public safety chair and the village manager, and we come to a resolution on that. If for some reason it seems to be out of the ordinary, that would be kind of the safeguard on that. Because so the guy would leave and you have a policy in place and the next chief said, you need 10 people.
Right, yeah, it could be.
You wouldn't want that, but, so that's,
So so what we're doing is we're going towards an ordinance.
yep,
And so we would just need language that would address the fiscal impact, not jacking up your overtime budget. Supporting your professional recommendation if circumstances warranted, and what the process of that would be. To try, not that the board, it will say that the board has ultimate discretion, but as much as we can nail down, we would appreciate that.
okay. I will work with Sarah on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that resolves the last decision point on the special events policy. It's been lingering since 2016.
Oh, yeah.
Man,
Well done.
waiting for the dream team.
There you go.
Any final comments from the committee?
Well, I think this has been great. Staff, do you?
It's been helpful.
Yes. And again, I'll reiterate my point of view. I want to remove ourselves from the micromanaging or the policy writing as a board, just mainly giving staff the big concepts that we want to make sure are covered. We have a village attorney, we have very, educated and thoughtful staff members. So to take ourselves out of creating by committee as much as we can will make our board business much more efficient, and I think save taxpayers money.
Are there any items that we did not cover today that
I think we're good.
So next steps would be a drafted ordinance or to come back to us, or would it go to JPNL because it's now an ordinance, not a. I guess you guys, staff can figure that out.
Yeah,
But I don't think it needs to come back to this committee.
I the only thing that I want to make sure that we are clear on as a committee is the major things that we want, again, the concepts, so we
So
want
it
to
should
make sure
come
are
back
covered.
here.
Can you bring it back, do you know for a review?
Yes.
Just sort of, and then
Yeah.
goes to JP and I will take it.
I don't know, I guess you could clarify that. It may not be necessary.
That part I don't care about too much.
I think
other than
it could
just
go to
making
full
sure.
board after.
Okay.
I would like to make sure that the points that we want to make sure, not the specifics, but the over,
Yeah, because the last thing I would want to do is get to a village board meeting for a revision.
Yes.
You don't want to go there.
And I'm sure, I'm fine with the criticism to JP and I. And then I just don't want to slow it up. We do want to get this.
Well, and also again, if we say these are the big things that we want to make sure covered, are they covered?
Yeah.
The village attorney says, no, your language is wrong,
Yeah.
then it needs to be written.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay, we clear this month? Okay. All right.
Crystal,
Meeting adjourned.
you can't adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Meeting adjourned.
I vote no, I'm just kidding.
All those in favor? Meeting adjourned.